This book is called Curious George Goes to the Hospital. Uh-oh. The hospital is like for something serious. It's not like the doctors where you just go get a checkup. Remember when you got your tonsils out at the hospital? That was your... Anyway. This is George. He lived with his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He was a good little monkey, but he was always curious. Today, George was curious about the big box on the man's desk. What could be in the box? What could be in it? George could not resist. He simply had to open it. It was full of funny little pieces of all sorts of shapes and all sorts of colors. George took one out. It looked like a piece of candy. Maybe it was candy. Maybe he could eat it. George put the piece in his mouth, and before he knew it, he swallowed it. Oh no, that's why you can't put things in your mouth. That's why he had to go to the hospital. A while later, the man with the yellow hat came home. "Why, George," he said, "I see you have already opened the box with the jigsaw puzzle. It was supposed to be a surprise for you. Well, let's go to work on it." Finally, the puzzle was finished. Well, almost finished. One piece was missing. What happened to the piece? He ate it. Oops. Sticky pages. The man looked for it everywhere, but he could not find it. "That's strange," he said. "It's a brand new puzzle. Well, it cannot be helped. Maybe we'll find it in the morning."
Monkey smells sad.
Yeah, the monkey feels guilty. I think that's what that face is. "Let's go to bed now, George." The next morning, George did not feel well. Oh no, he's sick. He had a tummy ache and did not want to eat his breakfast. The man was worried. He went to the telephone and called Dr. Baker. "I'll be over as soon as I can," said the doctor. Well, that's good. At least the doctor is going to come over. An animal doctor is called what? A vet. Remember, we learned that with the Barbies. First, Dr. Baker looked down George's throat and felt his tummy. Then he looked out his stethoscope and listened. Took out his stethoscope. I was reading through the camera and it was blurry. "I'm not sure what's wrong," he said. "You'd better take George to the hospital and have an x-ray taken. I'll call them and let them know you are coming. The x-ray is how they see inside of you."
Look at your big crab.
Yeah, usually it's to see like your bones inside your skin, but in this case, it's an x-ray of his stomach to see what he ate. "Don't worry, George," said the man when they were driving to the hospital. "You have been there before, when you broke your leg. Remember how nice the doctors and nurses were?" George held his big rubber ball tight as they walked up the hospital steps. A nurse took them down a long hallway to a room where she gave George something to drink that looked white and tasted sweet. "It's called barium," the nurse explained. "It helps the doctors find out what is wrong with you, George." In the next room stood a big table, and a doctor was just putting on a heavy apron. Then he gave the man one just like it. George was curious. Would he get one too? No, he did not. That's for radiation poisoning. "You get on that table, George," the doctor said. "I am going to take some x-ray pictures of your insides." He pushed a button and there was a funny noise. "There, now you may get up and we will have the x-rays developed right away." So that funny noise was the machine taking the pictures. "Now let's see. Oh, there is something there that should not be," said the doctor when they were looking at the x-rays. "Why, that looks like, I think that must be the piece that was missing in our jigsaw puzzle yesterday," said the man. "Well, well, well," said the doctor. "At least we know now what is wrong with our little patient. I'll tell Dr. Baker right away. George will have to stay at the hospital for a few days. They'll put a tube down his throat to get the piece out. It's only a small operation. I'll call a nurse and have her take you to the admitting office. So he has to get a whole surgery because he ate something he's not supposed to. That's why we never put anything like that in our mouths. Only food. And ask an adult first, just in case you have allergies or something like that. Many people were waiting outside the office. George had to wait too. Look, Betsy, the woman next to him said to her little girl, there's Curious George. Betsy looked up for a moment, but she did not even smile. Betsy had never been to a hospital before, and she was scared. Look, so that must be Betsy right here, this little girl with her mom talking to Curious George. There's lots of kids there, huh? Oh, I love you. Finally, it was George's turn. A pretty young nurse took him to the next room. My, how many rooms and how many nurses there were. One nurse wrote down a lot of things. Oh my God. Sorry, Facebook notifications. One nurse wrote down a lot of things about George. His name and his address and what was wrong with him. So she was doing his triage. Another nurse put a bracelet around his wrist. It has your name on it, George, she said, so that everybody knows who you are. See his hospital bracelet? We had to put yours around your ankle, and you didn't like it.
Ankle?
Yep. Look, there. Well, that's his wrist. Hospital bracelet. That's so they don't get the patients mixed up if you're sleeping. Then the pretty young nurse came back. My name is Carol, she said. I'm going to take you to your room now. We call it the children's ward and put you to bed. There will be lots of children there to keep you company. And so it was. There were a lot of children in the room. Some were up and around, and others were in their beds, with a doctor or nurse looking after them. Dave was having a blood transfusion. See, this kid's in a wheelchair. Can you say wheelchair?
Wheelchair.
Yeah, that's because he can't walk right now. Steve had his leg bandaged and was sitting in a go-kart, a wheelchair.
I see a monkey, but
Yeah, it's Curious George. Can you say Curious George?
Curious George.
Good job. Betsy was in bed looking sad. George got the bed next to Betsy. Maybe you can make her feel better. This bag right here, it drips fluids in the kids' arms if they can't eat or drink, and it makes sure that you get your medicine and you aren't dehydrated. It's called an IV. Intravenous. Yep, IV. It's at the hospital only. George was glad when he was in his bed at last. His tummy was hurting again. The man sat with him for a while. Now I have to leave you, George, he finally said.
Where did that monkey go?
Always laying in bed. Watch out. Thank you. I couldn't see the words. Now I have to leave you, George, he finally said. I'll be back first thing in the morning before they take you to the operating room. Nurse Carol...
Where did the monkey go?
He's laying in bed. Nurse Carol will tuck you in when it's time to sleep. Then he left. George just sat there and cried.
Where'd monkey go?
The monkey's laying in bed. That's Curious George. As he had promised, the man was back early the next morning. The nurses were keeping Curious George very busy. One nurse was taking his temperature, and one was taking his blood pressure. One was giving him a pill to make you sleepy, George, she said, and one was getting ready to give him a shot. Are we going to pick out the next book? You still got juice? It's going to hurt, George, she said, but only for a moment. She took his arm, and George let out a scream. But the needle hasn't touched you yet, she said, the nurse, laughing. There, now it's done. That wasn't so bad, was it? No, it really was not. And anyway, it was over now. See, it's usually just your mind that makes things worse than they are. By the time the attendant came with the stretcher to wheel him to the operating room, George was getting sleepy. He tried hard to stay awake. That's called anesthesia. It makes you tired. He was curious to see what would happen next. He's going to pass out. He could see a big table with bright lamps over it and the doctors and nurses all around. They had their caps on their head and masks over their face. Only their eyes were showing. That might look kind of scary, but it's to make sure that spit doesn't, it's got to be sanitary, you know? Anyway, only their eyes are showing. One of the doctors winked at George and patted his head. It was Dr. Baker, who had been to the house when it had all started. He looked funny with his mask on. And then George was fast asleep. When George woke up, he did not know what had happened. He did not even know where he was. Then he saw Nurse Carol. "It's all done, George," she said. "They got the piece out, and in a day or two you will be running around again." The man had brought him a picture book, but George felt sick and dizzy. His throat was hurting. Oh, his throat was hurting. Ouch. He was not even curious about the new book. He closed his eyes again. Come here. Cut it with Mama. He closed his eyes again. The more he sleeps, the better. Yeah, because you heal while you're sleeping. The next morning, George felt better. He even ate a dish of ice cream. Dr. Baker came to see him, and the man, of course, came too. Betsy was watching him from time to time. She seemed a little less sad, but she still did not smile. Steve wheeled his go-kart over to George's bed. "Tomorrow I can get up and try to work," he said. "Boy, I can hardly wait." Oh, get up and try to walk. "Boy, I can hardly wait." This is a long book. This is why we don't really ever read these. Already at 12 minutes. "I'll take you to the playroom now, George," Nurse Carol said the next morning. "And in the afternoon, your friend," look, this is them in the playroom. See, some kids are coloring. He's pulling his friend in a wagon. She's reading a book. They're watching TV. It looks like he's going to put on a puppet show. Yep. A lady was showing Betsy how to use finger paint. There were all sorts of things to play with, even a puppet theater. And that was just the thing for Curious George. He had 4 hands, so he could handle 4 puppets at the same time. George gave a real puppet show with a dragon and a clown and a bear.
The dog in the window.
And a bear and see, we're over here. A bear and a policeman. Yeah, the children laughed and shouted, and even Betsy for the first time smiled a little. Aw, good. See? He's making all the kids happy. This sounds like Patch Adams, kind of. There was a TV set in the playroom and also a record player. George was curious. If he climbed on the record player and turned the switch, would it go round and round like a real merry-go-round? It did. It started slowly, then it went faster and faster, and whoopee! George had lost his balance and was sailing through the air. Luckily, George had landed on a soft cushion. The children cheered and Betsy smiled again. George was so funny. But then the play lady picked George up. "That's enough for now," she said. "You'd better take a nap before lunch. We have a big day ahead of us. The mayor is coming to visit." McKenna, stop coloring on yourself. Are you kidding me? I just gave you a bath. "The mayor is coming to visit the hospital today, and later you will be going home, George." When George woke up, Steve was just taking his first steps. A nurse was helping him, and the children were watching. The go-kart was standing there empty. George was curious. He looked at it, then he climbed into it. Then he grabbed the wheels. Yeah, then he grabbed the wheels, and then, while nobody was looking, he wheeled the go-kart wheelchair right out of the room. Yep, he snuck it away. George could make the go-kart go very fast. This was fun. Down the hall he went. By now the nurse had noticed that he was gone and came rushing after him. "George! George!" she shouted. But George was too excited to listen. He wheeled around the corner and down the ramp to the floor below, where some men were busy pushing large carts. Yeah, hopefully he doesn't end up back in the hospital. Nurses were showing the mayor around. Uh-oh, the mayor's important. Look, they got food carts. Look, do you see the nurses with their food carts? Uh-oh, he's going to make a mess. Oh, no. George had tried to stop, but it was too late. Wham! The go-kart landed right... Yeah, the go-kart landed right in the middle of everything. Lunch carts tumbled, spinach and scrambled eggs and strawberry jam were all over the floor. People fell over each other, and George was thrown out of the go-kart and landed right in the mayor's arms. Come on. What a mess it was. "You broke all my dishes," someone cried. "He ruined the go-kart," complained another. "What will the mayor think of it?" whispered someone else. And so it went. Suddenly, everybody looked up and listened. From above came happy laughter. And there stood Betsy, laughing, laughing, laughing. Then all the children joined in laughing, and the mayor was laughing. Finally, everybody just laughed, and everybody was laughing except George. Yeah, because George is embarrassed. Betsy came running down the ramp, threw her arms around George, and kissed him. "Don't be sad, George," she said. "This whole thing was so funny." Yeah, what a mess, huh, McKenna? She said, "This whole thing was so funny. I never laughed so much in my life. I'm so glad you were in the hospital with me." Now the director of the hospital spoke. "I am sorry this happened, Mr. Mayor," he said, "but I think we'll just clean up the mess and be done with it." "George," he went on, "you've made a terrible mess, but you also made our sad little Betsy happy again, and that is more than any of us have done. And now I see your friend has just come to take you home. So goodbye, George, and take good care of yourself." Wow, that was a long book. George was curious. Well, who would not be? The moment he had reached home, he ripped the paper off, tore open the box, and there was a piece of the puzzle that had caused all the trouble. "How nice of the doctor to save it for us," said the man with the yellow hat, "and now we can finish the puzzle." Ew. The end. Remember, if you like this book, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you're notified every time we upload.